We are continuing our OpenText.org podcasts where we're introducing some of the basic concepts about the model, some of the basic concepts about how to get in and use the project for your advantage while taking Greek. We're going to talk today about word group level annotation, and again I want to refer you to the OpenText annotation model introduction that I've asked you to read for the course. But before we look at the actual word group annotation on OpenText.org, we need to know a few things about what to expect, definitions of things, abbreviations, etc. So again, I want to start out here by looking at word groups and defining what the word groups are. Word groups are basically your word level annotation. It's above morphology, however, and because of that, word groups can be either a single word or a word group may be many words. Now, we hear the word group and automatically think of something that is more than one of an item. But in the OpenText.org model and in functional grammar or functional linguistics generally, when you talk about a group, you may only be talking about a single word. So keep that in mind when we look at the word group annotation model on OpenText.org and look at some of these things in action. This will make a little bit more sense to you. We already saw in the clause level in 1 Corinthians 1 verse 1 where you had a subject that had a whole lot of words in it, and I mentioned there that all those words formed a word group. That's the kind of thing we're talking about here. It could have just been Paulos, but instead it was Paulos, Kletos, Apostolos, and so on. Word groups, you need to know there are basically two different kinds of word groups that you can talk about. There's a head term and then there are modifiers. Head term has to do with, what is the main word. So in a moment when we look at 1 Corinthians 1:1 again, we'll see that the head term, the main term if you will, that's being modified in the group is the term Paulos. Okay? Then it is modified by, modifiers as they're called, and they're modified in different ways. There are different functions or different varieties of modification that can occur in language. And so when you look at your OpenText.org introduction, you'll see a discussion of specifiers, of definers, of qualifiers, and relators. So we need to define those just briefly here. A specifier is a kind of modifier that classifies or that identifies the word it modifies. Okay? Common examples of specifiers in Greek would be articles, ha, he, or ta, or prepositions of any kind. We'll talk about all the different kinds of prepositions that are available in Koine Greek. So those specify, they classify, they identify the word that they modify. Definers, which you'll find quite often in the New Testament, definer is a modifier that attributes some sort of feature or maybe further defines the word that it modifies. Now you may guess already that common definers include adjectives. That's probably the, if I can put it this way, the quote-unquote canonical way or standard way of defining something is by giving it either an attributive adjective or maybe an adjective in predicate structure where it predicates something, sort of the this is that structure. But you can also use appositional words and phrases, and as we'll see in the 1 Corinthians 1:1 text where Paulos is the head term, you'll see that apostolos is a noun. It's not an adjective, but it's being used there in apposition. It stands in apposition, so an appositive is how it's used there. So adjectives, appositional words, appositional phrases, and so on. We'll see examples of that as we go through our text in the semester, during the semester. Qualifiers are are kinds of modifiers that limit or somehow constrain the scope of the word that it modifies. I want you to think here in terms of words in certain cases. So probably the most common way to qualify something or to restrict it would be to use the genitive case, because the basic semantics, as we'll learn a little bit later in the course, the basic semantics of the genitive case is restriction. So it's not just, Paul is not just an apostle, he is apostle Christou Jesu. He is an apostle of Jesus Christ. So now that restricts or qualifies what kind of apostle he is. So that would be one thing to look at. You can also see a qualification occurring with the dative case. when, say, something is, when you maybe name something and then you qualify it by saying that it is for someone or to someone or something along those lines. So genitive or dative cases. And the last kind we have here are relators. Relators are, well, a relator is a word specified by a preposition. Now, go back up to specifier for a second. You remember I said one of the things that can specify is a preposition. So it is maybe through or it is upon, and then you have an object of a prepositional phrase. That object of the preposition is a relator. The preposition is actually specifying the relationship between whatever the object of the preposition is and the head term, or whatever word it's modifying. Okay, so we'll see that in action as well, again in 1 Corinthians 1:1, which is apparently a good place to go to see examples of all of these at work at one time. So again, you have objects of prepositions are your basic kinds of relators that you're going to be finding throughout the New Testament. And the basic idea is that the preposition itself specifies the relationship between the object of a preposition and whatever word it's modifying. So we'll talk more about that when we get into the grammar of prepositions a little bit later in the course. So basically, that's where we leave off. I mean, we're ready now to go and take a look in the next short podcast at the OpenText.org word group annotation and try to get a sense for what's going on there.